So, this is prompted by questions by Yatonio, and I'll just explain it like this. Outside the church, there is no salvation, right? But does that mean that those who are visibly outside the church, those who are not part of the visible church, necessarily going to hell, or in the Western sense, unsaved? No, of course not. We can say where the church is and who's part of the church, but we can't say who's not, right? We know where the Holy Spirit is, we don't know where it's not. Baptisms in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are valid. They're valid. We know where the Eucharist is, we don't know where it's not. There was a quote, there are many sheep outside of the church, and there are many wolves inside the church. And especially the fact that the West still holds to they pray to Christ, they believe in Him, fully God, fully man. They believe in the Trinity, the hypostatic union, and they have many of the saints, and they ask them to pray for them. This is good. I expect most of the Catholics that I know to be with God after they die and not be in torments. I expect many Protestants there too. Now, after Pentecost, the church spread out throughout the world, from India to Ireland. And the three great sees were Antioch, first, where the Christians were first called Christians, Alexandria, and Rome. By Nicaea, Constantinople and Jerusalem were added. In the 5th century, Rome, teachings like from Augustine, they started to elaborate on them, and from the 5th century there started to be division between the church, and it was a lot had to do with language and just the view of things. By the 5th century, almost nobody in the West could speak Greek or Syriac, and the East, almost nobody could speak Latin. So at 1054 there was a split. It wasn't political. It was the Bishop of Rome said he was the bishop over all bishops. No, he's not. So the 4 Eastern patriarchates said, take a hike. It said, no, we don't believe that. So Rome excommunicated every other Christian see, and in turn got excommunicated by every other see. So that was the Schism of 1054, and it was also because Rome added words to the Nicene Creed, which they weren't allowed to do, and it was added in a very haphazard way in Spain in the 6th century. And there's a lot of other issues, but it grew worse because of Anselm. After the split, there were Anselm and Aquinas. Aquinas had Miracles of the Saints, and he had the dogma of Transubstantiation, where it was explaining the Eucharist, the holy mystery of God. He thought he could explain. This is bad enough, and he said at the end of his life that all of his works were straw. But the Catholic Church accepted it as dogma anyways. And then after that, we could kind of see Rome as the first Protestant church. You had factioning after 500 years of the split, with Lutheran, Anglican, Calvinist, and then splitting. Now, the Christian church is what we see as Christian, is that which believes in the Trinity and the hypostatic union. The Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons are not Christian in our eyes, because they deny the Trinity and they deny the deity of Christ. They do this because they believe they're the restored church. Never mind that the Bible was only compiled between 300 and 500 years after the death of Christ. They believe they're restorationist churches. So the church disappeared around the 1st century. Boom, poof, it was gone, which is just stupid, ignorant and silly and blasphemous. So we hold out. I fully believe that even Muslims and atheists, people who claim to be Muslims and atheists, will be with God. but being outside of the church is not a safe place to be. The works salvation issue, works faith issue. This has never been an issue. Us in the East look at the West, the argument between Roman Catholics and Protestants, and we scratch our head because you have how many epistles of Paul and the epistles of James? It should be abundantly clear after just a cursory look at the New Testament what the answer is. Well, I wouldn't say a cursory one, but just reading any of those, you should. It's just blindly obvious. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's settled in there. Individual Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses may be part of the invisible church and not the visible church. And the visible church is just as much of the church. The invisible church is just as those who we call that are part of the invisible church are just as much part of the church as the visible church. But Mormonism is evil. It's an apostate, anti-Christian government of its own. It's wicked and whorish, and well, I shouldn't say whorish, horrible. It's bad news. It's soul destroying, and so is the Watchtower organization. The Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints and the Watchtower organization are abominations. They are anti-Christian. They are evil. They are satanic. They preach another gospel, and they lord over man like a cult, because they are cults. Now, to the verse that was quoted, your body is a temple of God, this verse can also be applied to substance abuse. I don't think so. I don't think we have the ability to do that. We can't just take Paul's words and rework them, and it leads to dangerous legalism. Now, I'm not opposed to somebody saying, I believe my body is a temple and I'm not going to intoxicate myself. But it's not that you're destroying your body. That's pretty much not a sin. I mean, our bodies will be destroyed in martyrdom. You know, there's no sin in that. Or, you know, hell, I mean, even if I mean, we think nothing of the body really, but we're not docetists. We don't hate the body, but Paul was talking about joining your flesh to another, the sex, the immorality of sex, the indignity of sexual immorality, the ignobleness of it. With substances, it's if you were to say that, or if somebody were to teach this and change that around, the thing that's bad about drugs and stuff like that is the addiction and the mood changing and the mind changing, that your purpose in life is diverted. You're lusting after things of this world, and somebody could just as through vanity. How many people through vanity are led away in sin, and the sin of vanity, of loving their own flesh too much? So I would say no, we can't do that. But if you take that, you say, oh my God, St. Paul said my body is a temple for the Holy Spirit, I'm not going to corrupt it. Fine, that's fine, but it shouldn't be thrown out there and misused. So I have no problem with that private thing. Another thing, St. Francis of Assisi is not a saint in our church. He was technically not part of the church. He's post-schism. But many people in the Orthodox Church still ask him to pray for them and have great respect for him and consider him a saint. Now, this was post-schism. Again, I want to emphasize the fact that the phrase, there is no salvation outside of the church, does not mean just because you are not part of the Eastern Orthodox Church, you're not a Christian, or God doesn't love you or anything. That's not true. But not to mention that almost every Christian holds to this. There is no salvation outside of the church. The Lutherans, the Anglicans, the Roman Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, the Assyrian Church of the East. But it has to be understood. I mean, somebody's going to take a soundbite of this video and be like, where I say there's no salvation outside of the church, and be like, look what he said. This is something that was, it's not taught in words, but it's taught in ideas by Paul. I'll get to the issue of proselytizing and evangelizing. We forbidden from proselytizing, but we do evangelize. And I have videos up about that, but I'll go over it for you. The two churches didn't split over politics, but you can bet that the Crusades were launched just, a few decades after the Schism, the Great Schism, and more Eastern Orthodox Christians died in the Crusades than Muslims or Roman Catholics. Now, I'm not saying that the Crusades were prompted by the Schism. They weren't. It was Muslim invasion. The Crusades weren't launched to kill Eastern Orthodox Christians, but many were destroyed, and many of our churches and cathedrals were destroyed, and relics of saints that still reside in the West were stolen through bloody warfare against Christian brothers, against Christians from the West destroying and murdering Eastern Orthodox and tearing down their churches. I'll make a part 2 to this, but yeah, Transubstantiation, trying to describe one of the core mysteries that God, the Eastern Orthodox believe only that which was revealed. We can't use these logical systems of mankind. We have no systematic doctrine, dogma, or theology. We can't take Plato or Aristotle and try to figure out what does baptism really do. Just like when people say baptism is an outward sign of an inward change, I would say that that's blasphemy, because now, first of all, it's counter to everything the New Testament says about baptism, and second of all, you're explaining what baptism is beyond what has been revealed. We don't create things, we don't add things. Oh, this is more, innovation is not our thing. We're not original, we are not innovative, we are not creative. We hold that unchanged which was passed down to us from the apostles, not adding or taking away, because that puts people into confusion. Look at the West. 50,000 different denominations in America alone. Not even Martin Luther or John Calvin intended that. Alright, I'll go to part 2. Take it easy, peace to you, may God save Serbia, Syria, and Ireland. Many sheep outside of the church, and there are many wolves inside the church. And especially the fact that the West still holds to they pray to Christ, they believe in Him, fully God, fully man. They believe in the Trinity, the hypostatic union, and who's part of the church, but we can't say who's not, right? We know where the Holy Spirit is, we don't know where it's not. Baptisms in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are valid. They're valid. We know where the Eucharist is, we don't know where it's not. There was a quote there. So, this is prompted by questions by Yatonio, and I'll just explain it like this. Outside the church, there is no salvation, right? But does that mean that those who are visibly outside the church, those who are not part of the visible church, necessarily going to hell, or in a Western sense, unsaved? No, of course not. We can say where the church is, many of the saints, and they ask them to pray for them. This is good. I expect most of the Catholics that I know to be with God after they die and not be in torments. I expect many Protestants there too. Now, after Pentecost, the church spread out